Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America, we bring the resource to you. The DU Podcast with your host, Chris Jennings.
Joining us today is a great partner of Ducks Unlimited. We have Daniel Haas and Neill Haas from Mossy Oak. Hey, guys, welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
Hey, thank you for having us.
We'll get this thing kicked off, and we'll do this the same way that we do a lot of shows. I want you guys to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into Mossy Oak. But, what you guys do at Mossy Oak, where is Mossy Oak located, where you guys live, where you guys hunt, everything like that. So, Daniel, can you go ahead and start us with that?
Yeah, and Neil and I are twins, and since we have such a strong history between Mossy Oak and Dad and our granddad and the outdoors in general, pretty much our entire lives are kind of charted alongside each other with all of our memories hunting and growing up, and family's really important to us. So all of our memories, me and Neil, are inseparable for most of our lives, even now, especially duck hunting, sharing a blind with each other and sharing the woods. So, but yeah. We both grown up in West Point, went to Mississippi State, 15 minutes from West Point. Campus is close by the office. Our parents, grandparents, everybody went there, and then we're right after that back at Mossy Oak, and ever since then we've just been working for Mossy Oak and taking on all sorts of different projects that fall under the brand.
No, that's awesome. And Neill, how about you?
Yeah, kind of echoing what Daniel said. We've grown up. We had great influences growing up with our granddad and our dad really teaching us a lot about not only hunting but conservation and woodsmanship and taking care of the resource and all that kind of stuff. And so it gives us good appreciation from a young age, and hopefully we'll teach our kids the same. And that's kind of what keeps all this around for everyone. And you guys know that better than anyone. So, but yeah, we're just we're big on conservation and anything we can do to help the resource. And so we do, a ton of work, and that's why I think Mossy Oak and Ducks Unlimited are such great partners, just because, they believe in a lot of the same things.
Absolutely. Let's kind of discuss, before we started the show, we had a brief conversation and to really get into like the story of Mossy Oak. It's such a big brand, but I don't know which one of you wants to take this on, but how did this start? How did the entire brand start?
I'll let Daniel kick us off with this one. He's a pretty good storyteller.
There you go.
Yeah, Neil and I could both take this one. It's enjoyable to tell and to think about, even though we weren't around for the early days. Our granddad, Papa, as everybody else knows him as Mr. Fox, but he is from Mobile, Alabama, and so he grew up down there. And a lot of our family on his side of the family is from South Alabama, and so some of our old family friends had an old hunting club called Choctaw Bluff that Neil could go into the history a lot more there of Choctaw Bluff. But because of Pawpaw hunting there, when Dad was old enough to hunt, he spent a lot of his life. My granddad ended up coming to Mississippi State and building a life in West Point with my grandmother. And so that's how Mossy Oak ended up being tied to this area. But he never left his roots to Choctaw Bluff and hunting with his original hunting buddies. So what Pawpaw cared more about than anything back then was turkey hunting. And so he would take my dad turkey hunting down there, and they had the hunting club broken into a lot of different territories. And there was an area that had a tree on it that was kind of a meeting point because it was an oak mixed in the middle of a bunch of pines. So it was an easy identification to say, meet at the Mossy Oak tree. So if you're hunting in the area where the Mossy Oak was, it was a commonly known tree that you could use as a meetup point. So when Dad was, he was hunting with Pawpaw, turkey hunting every spring, and getting frustrated at the lack of mobility that his camouflage offered him, because back then, it had been some kind of grimy looking military camo that really stuck out like a sore thumb in South Alabama, and build these intricate blinds to try to, you'd pretty much have to be confined to one tree, and that doesn't really work out too well if you're turkey hunting, as anybody who turkey hunts knows. So Dad was so frustrated that there wasn't a simple solution, because he just knew that if you had clothes on your back that resembled the area that you were hunting or looked like the tree that you were trying to sit up against, that you wouldn't be confined to one tree. You could, chase turkey around the woods and become invisible no matter where you were. So that kind of was the initial idea for Mossy Oak and Bottomland, as everybody knows, the original pattern. The inspiration for it wasn't, all sorts of companies pop up left and right, and somebody might just think they see an opportunity to sell a camouflage T-shirt or a shirt or jacket or whatever it is for profit and turn it into a business and make a living. But Dad's genuinely, he was just trying to figure out a way to better hide from turkeys.
Yeah, just kind of like innovation due to necessity right there. He was just trying to kill a turkey, and that's awesome.
That is exactly right. So anyway, he literally got a handful of dirt, sticks, and leaves in a Ziploc bag and went to work with a designer and a textile mill to try to figure out how to match up. And we have if next time y'all are in West Point, you can come see it. But we've got some of the original garments and the original cotton and even the Pantone colors and the original sketches of Bottomland with Dad trying to figure out how to get the colors matched up perfectly with what he envisioned in his head. And when they kicked around names for the company, trying to figure out what they were going to call it, they probably some ones that wouldn't have aged quite as well, trying to figure out what to call it. And they eventually, between Dad and Papa riding the dirt roads down there, the name Mossy Oak just kind of popped in their heads, and it was a perfect name. So it stuck, and everybody loved it. And luckily, I don't know that this name was actually kicked around, but everybody jokes that they were telling him to call it Invisiflage or some other goofy name like that. And thankfully for everyone involved,
thank goodness that never happened.
Yeah, that didn't happen. And Mossy Oak, it was an instant classic, and we think it's a great name still to this day.
When Dad was able to get that first roll of fabric printed and everything, my grandmother, or our grandmother, is a very, very good expert sewer. And so she sewed all the clothes together in the first early days. She sewed everything in her attic. And I'm sorry, I have my duck hunting dog in the room with me.
No, it's perfect.
Yeah, I figured that would add a little bit of to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, have a duck dog. But yeah, that's part of the cool story is for the first couple of years, they're taking phone calls from the house line and sewing the clothes in the attic, and don't even have enough money saved up yet to buy an office space or anything like that. So it really was a built from the ground up type company out of nowhere. So it's a pretty cool success story from doing something that everyone told you that just was kind of stupid and wouldn't work, and it was kind of just a silly idea kind of thing.
No, that's great, and it's a cool story, and I'd heard some of that or read most of it, but I'm sure that our audience did not know. But it's also cool when you sit there and you look at the logo. The company logo truly is like that Mossy Oak. And my only question there is, that tree still standing? Do you guys own that property now, or that one Mossy Oak?
No, it's so the hunting club is owned by kind of one family, and a lot of it's leased ground and stuff like that. But it's the hunting club was started in the 1920s. It's one of the oldest turkey hunting clubs in North America, maybe the oldest, I'm not sure. But the tree actually got struck by lightning probably 15 years ago, something like maybe longer. And but the family that owns the property was able to salvage a bunch of the wood and get it cut into a bunch of boards. And so over the last 15 years or so, we've been able to make some pretty cool stuff. Making duck calls and turkey calls and things of that nature out of the wood. So we've been able to use the wood from the tree in some pretty cool projects.
Man, that's cool. That's kind of like the natural story. You make a baseball bat out of it or something.
If we had more of the wood, we would have had everything under the sun made from it, and a baseball bat would have been one of those things. But luckily we've been able to make some. We've had turkey calls, crow calls, knife handles, duck calls, a bunch of really, really cool things made. Obviously not for sale.
Yeah.
Short of a few, auctions that we've used. We've got our local auction that raises money for St. Jude and Catch a Dream, and then we've done some stuff with NWTF. Would probably have something that would make sense for a waterfowl project in the future. But yeah, those were made for family, friends, and people in our immediate family, and that have been around Mossy Oak forever and whatnot. But there've been some really cool things, and I'll give the short version of this story. But we actually, the most obscure part of that, what we've made with the Mossy Oak wood, but that is also one of the coolest because it's the only one that you're able to share with somebody, is we made a barrel of whiskey with Jefferson's Reserve and Trey Zeller up there in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And we wouldn't have. I always assumed Woodford has a double oaked whiskey, and didn't know anything about that process, and I assumed it had something to do with the barrel. And we don't have enough wood left now to even make a stave, let alone a whole barrel. But we ended up talking to them, and they have just kind of a finishing process where they can char little pieces of oak, and they can take an already 8 or 10 year old barrel of bourbon and steep some wood in there. That's they know the temperature and the surface area and the type of wood to bring out certain flavors and all that kind of stuff. So they charred some of the Mossy Oak wood, took a barrel of Jefferson's that had already been aging 9 or 10 years, and then finished it with the Mossy Oak wood in there for another about a year and a half. And then a few Christmases back, we had that barrel bottled for some family friends and some people close to us. And, all the other things that we've made with the wood are really cool, but they're, it's just one very tangible, call or whatever it is that you own. But the bourbon is extremely cool because if somebody's in camp with us, we can share a glass and you're literally drinking a small piece of history with the Mossy Oak wood there. So that is one of the coolest things that we've done with it.
Yeah, that is really cool. Now, I know that you guys are both diehard duck hunters. Do either one of you have a call from the wood?
We do, yes.
Oh,
we
that's
both.
cool.
And some people in the family decided to put theirs up on a shelf, and but I put mine. I don't really blow it much, but I put it on my lanyard, and it goes with me everywhere I go. So it's a little beat up from some of the rough. I've been known to go the extra mile and go through briar patches and buckbrush and whatever I have to go through to get to where I need a duck hunt. So I beat my gear up pretty good. And so my call is probably not as in good a shape as most people's is, but I take mine everywhere I go.
Luckily, we were able to salvage a decent amount of the wood at first, so we didn't have to be stingy with everyone in the family got a duck call, everyone in the family got a turkey call and whatnot. So we're not making any more of that wood. It's got to stay around forever. So the last little bit we've got left, we're very, very protective of.
I'll bet. That's pretty cool. And that just brings that story kind of full circle where you have something in your hand from that tree. And that's just cool. So the entire company was kind of based from a turkey hunting perspective, but you guys consider yourselves maybe more duck hunters or turkey hunters?
I would say both. Daniel is probably the same way, and our dad's the same way, and we all love to deer hunt, but duck hunting and turkey hunting are definitely our biggest passions. And Dad grew up. We always say, he grew up. He designed the camo to hide from turkeys and all that, but he grew up duck hunting on those same river bottoms that he was shooting turkeys in, and mostly shooting wood ducks. But he grew up duck hunting a lot and was a very avid duck hunter from an early age, and as was our grandfather. So they definitely both of them have been duck hunting their entire lives. But the hiding from turkeys is kind of what sparked the idea, but then it grew into obviously hiding from all animals in nature.
And like Neil said, turkey and ducks kind of always are our two favorite things to hunt. And as anyone knows who's warm bottomland and flooded timber, the necessity of developing that camouflage pattern originated with turkeys, but because of the area that he was hunting in, the habitat that he was hunting in, it's stood the test of time as probably the most versatile camouflage pattern for hunting that's ever been created because it does work so well, whether you're duck hunting or turkey hunting and in a lot of areas deer hunting too. It's just such a good pattern, and especially nowadays, it's become timeless because you got a whole different new generation that didn't grow up with it, but that has been introduced to it now, and it might have been developed in 1986, but now you can find anybody from a teenager to someone who's been hunting their whole life and is an old man wearing it. So I think it's pretty cool to see the kind of like generational span of people that love to wear bottomland, whether they're duck hunting or turkey hunting or deer, anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, bottomland's so popular. And that kind of leads me to my next question. And I don't know if you guys have I'm sure you guys have talked about this, but kind of the original bottomland, it kind of had a resurgence, recently, and well, not too recently, but how did you guys see that, or even your dad? It's like, was that just like more vindication for that pattern when this kind of resurgence of the original bottomland?
It started really at Daniel and myself and a small group of friends, and really buying stuff. People would start selling stuff on eBay, and it's a small group of people just would really love bottomland. You couldn't buy it anywhere. It kind of been discontinued, and people were starting to pay crazy amounts for certain products in bottomland, old vintage clothes and stuff like hats or whatever. And we started seeing people paying 5, 6, 7 times what it was originally purchased for on eBay, and we were like, well, all this attention, all these people paying all this money for bottomland, we should probably consider bringing it back. And so that's kind of where bringing it back started, was just all the attention it was getting on eBay and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going to assume that you guys probably just answered this question, but what is, each of you, do you guys have like a specific pattern that you prefer over any other of all Mossy Oak patterns?
Yeah, probably bottomland. I mean, you're rarely going to. I mean, we love all the patterns, like especially turkey hunting. Definitely love obsession and greenleaf and some of those patterns, and duck hunting love the shadowgrass patterns and all that. But most 9 times out of 10, if we're hunting somewhere, we're standing next to a tree, and so we usually have bottomland on.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of different patterns that have stood the test of time, and shadowgrass is obviously a phenomenal pattern that was introduced in the 90s, and the newer iterations of that with shadowgrass blades and shadowgrass habitat. Those are awesome patterns, but the connection to the family and the history of Mossy Oak and the places that we hunt and all the old jackets we've stolen from Papa and Dad out of their closets and all the good stuff like that. That putting on bottomland and going to do whatever kind of hunting you're hitting the woods for is it just we've got a lot of old garments and stuff that just feels like an old friend, and especially the stuff that was passed down that we stole from Papa or Dad, and a lot of that old history is just like embodied in bottomland. And some of the other original patterns, bottomland's like the greatest hit, and a lot of people love greenleaf in early season deer hunting and especially turkey hunting, but it kind of bottomland is always there. It's an absolute classic and it's timeless, but there's a lot of those vintage patterns that maybe are more obscure. Most people are aware of greenleaf and tree stand and the original shadowgrass pattern, but then you've got some of the full foliage and fall foliage that were part of that first 4, 5, 6 years of camouflage that not as many people know about. That if you have an old jacket or a shirt or whatever, they're pretty cool patterns, and there's not as much clothing to go around with those on them because they haven't been reintroduced from the archives. But yeah, we've got a lot of obscure patterns to choose from in the archives too.
No, that's cool. And I know I was pretty excited to see, the original shadowgrass kind of made an appearance. That's what I started hunting in the 90s, early to mid 90s, when I started duck hunting. And that in growing up in Indiana, I felt like shadowgrass had a really strong foothold there rather than bottomlands, because we don't hunt like flooded timber, like duck hunting. It's a much more variable habitat. So, I was a big guy, big fan of shadowgrass, the original, and then you guys brought that back out with Filson a couple years ago, and that was just so cool. I mean, I was even getting emails because I think we ran a couple of the products in the magazine, and I got a bunch of emails from people like, "Hey, man, when's that going to be available?" Even some buddies I grew up hunting with, because we thought shadowgrass was just like the most awesome thing ever, and some guys I grew up hunting with were like, "Oh, do you have one of those? Like, that is so cool." So that's all kind of an interesting aspect to the Mossy Oak story, is how these patterns have stood the test of time and continue to be brought back to the forefront and by fans. I mean, I guess that's a way to describe fans of the pattern. We can probably get into all the different patterns and talk like that forever, but one thing I wanted to ask you guys is Mossy Oak. You described the history of the of the company, of the brand, even the garments, but you guys have grown from just, what you were describing, sewing, your grandmother sewing in the attic, to, almost like a massive media company. How is that transition within the company? You're a camouflage company, but now that you guys have Mossy Oak Go, you have multiple companies underneath Mossy Oak. How has that transition been, and how did that kind of get rolling?
I think you have to go way back to get to the origins of that. But even before that, if you're talking about all that Mossy Oak has grown into, you have to start with, at some point in the 90s, the first few years of the company, it was all camouflage. And like Neil said, my grandmother sewing garments in her sewing room attic, and Papa answering the phone for the 1-800 number. And they were running and gunning with just a few of them for the early days. And then the first evolution of Mossy Oak past camouflage was what probably most people aren't aware of, unless you're part of the eBay group that Neil was talking about, or you have some of your dad's old shirts. But a lot of people consider the greatest button-down shirts ever made were part of the Mossy Oak Companions line, and that was the first, beyond camouflage, Mossy Oak's first step into casual clothing. Heavyweight chamois shirts and lightweight, really soft brush cotton shirts, and a few jackets, work pants, and things like that. And it was all under the Mossy Oak Companions brand name, and it was Dad's slogan that he used for it was "Instant Old Friends," and it was the thing that embodies the identity of an instant old friend, whether it's the first 24 hours you spend with a new duck dog, or a night in camp with somebody who's like-minded to you, cooking and drinking and listening to music and sharing a blind with each other. And then the way that your favorite jacket feels when you pull it out of the closet, and he wanted to replicate that through, the first time you take it off the coat hanger, it feels like your new favorite shirt. Companions was the first foray in beyond camouflage, making casual wear, and it was all let what Dad has stayed true to even to this day. That's guided everything we do. Is and the reason I'm talking about it is he is obsessed with this idea that everything we do is guided by Mother Nature and the critters and wildlife and the land. And so he wanted the clothing to be developed with a color palette of it was all dirt, sticks, leaf, bark, leaf, kind of same colors that you would find in the first patterns that are all the vintage patterns that you see now. And then a few years past that, Dad tells a story, and I'm probably gonna butcher part of it, but there was a really warm winter, and it was like a bunch of the big sporting goods retailers for hunting brands and apparel had a tough winter, and everybody was kind of freaking out, and it kind of inspired Dad to think a little more deeply about just the apparel that we're selling, and he started thinking more about the if it weren't for the critter, we wouldn't have anything to hunt. And if it weren't for the land that provides habitat and a home for the critters, then the critters wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be here. And he's always been obsessed, and has been instilled through my granddad and my grandmom too, of this obsession with the outdoors and the wildlife and the dirt. But he, from a Mossy Oak perspective, really started thinking a lot more deeply about that in the 90s. And some of the first things that we did to branch out beyond clothing were Biologic and Mossy Oak Properties and Mossy Oak Native Nurseries, and the things that have kind of grown into what we call the Gamekeeper brands. So for people not familiar, Mossy Oak Properties was started a little over 20 years ago now to provide a real estate franchise model and brand for people that are just like us. If you're looking for hunt land or recreational ag, timberland, whatever, things that the average, for lack of a better term, somebody that lives in a concrete jungle. If you're trying to buy a piece of hunting land, you'd rather take it from a hunter than you would from somebody who's never been outside the city. And that kind of is where Mossy Oak Properties originated, and that was born out of this obsession for the land and taking care of it, and having authentic people who are going to be the actual ones that are leading that conversation. And then Mossy Oak Biologic, again, really natural, but it was on probably the first really big company to think more about wildlife nutrition. And now you can buy forage and seed for any animal that we hunt, whether it's planting wildflowers or if it's things you want to plant for ducks, deer, turkeys, and all that good stuff. But that started really naturally too, thinking about the critters and what they eat, and all these back then kind of bogus people feeding whitetail and turkey and duck and whatever. People didn't really think that much about it. They would kind of treat it like anybody would treat their cattle farm or whatever. And so they were just sort of thinking there has to be a better way that's more nutritional, that puts the critter first, instead of just kind of saying, oh, we're going to follow these best practices for a cattle farm and call it a day. And then Mossy Oak Native Nurseries is our probably, I would say, the most obscure of all those. If you haven't actually been to West Point, or you're not a tree guy, you might not be aware of it, but that was mine and Neil's first summer jobs when we were in high school. I was working at our tree nursery and pulling weeds and planting acorns and gathering acorns from our favorite different trees around town with Dad and a guy named Dudley Phelps. That's like our local tree guru. But the nursery was our, the next kind of these little things that pop up naturally that are things that Dad's obsessed with. That are none of these things are Dad sitting down at night thinking, what can I do to make more money? They're all natural obsessions that are like, okay, my mom literally walked outside in the backyard one day and saw 1,000 trees growing from seedlings stacked up in the corner by the fishing pond, and she's like, all right, you got to do something about this. We can't, our backyard can't be overtaken by all these acorns that you keep gathering up. So the nursery started out of necessity with that. And now we've got gamekeepers, as I mentioned, and we publish, before stewardship became a buzzword outside the hunting world. The Gamekeeper magazine, Journal for Wildlife Stewardship, has been published quarterly for a decade, providing habitat tips and ways to improve your hunting property, whether you got a lease or you own a bunch of land or whatever it is. These really manageable, accessible projects that you can do to make your little piece of dirt better. And now we've even got a dog kennel, and we breed Mossy Oak Kennels breeds British Labs for all sorts of things. Obviously, the Labs are great family dogs, but primarily for duck hunting. and it's all just kind of grown. You know, the well is this obsession with the critters and the dirt that Papa and Dad have kind of instilled in our family, and everything that Dad does kind of is generated from that.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, and you know, just kind of you kind of ran down the list, and I think that really provides our listeners, you know, an idea of the breadth of Mossy Oak, and it's really cool. Like you said, it all stems. Each one of these stems from, you know, what I would consider like, you know, like the habitat, you know, the in the animals, the wildlife, the habitat, and it all kind of leads back to a real conservation ethic. One more that I wanted to ask you about, and it's Mossy Oak Wellness. You know, where did that kind of come from, and you know, how involved with that are you guys?
Yeah, there's some other people in the company that are more hands on with that than I am, but that's another cool, you know, new piece of Mossy Oak that is, you know, just a little more focused on. It's right now just drink mixes, but hopefully we'll grow into some other things that they're helpful for people that are living their life outside. You know, having some little pieces of that life to take with them, and continue to build out this kind of all encompassing anything you do outside, having Mossy Oak be a part of it kind of mentality.
Very cool. You know, a couple more things that I wanted to talk to you guys about, but you know, you kind of hit on the Mossy Oak kennels, but I know both of you guys have, you know, I'm assuming both of you guys, well, you both said you have your dogs in your office, so you guys do, but are you guys, you know, more hands-on? Which one of you is probably the most hands-on, like, retriever trainer?
I would probably myself, but you know,
Neil, I have to cut in and say Neil's also blessed with Timbo, who is one of the greatest duck dogs that any of us have ever hunted with. So while he might be a little better trainer than I am, he's also blessed with the best dog in town.
Yeah, some would say that a dog is only as good as his trainer as well. So I'm joking. Timbo was blessed with great genes, and you know, so what kind of started the kennel thing is, you know, growing up, I was just, you know, I wanted my own dog. My dad had dogs growing up, but, you know, I never had a dog that was my own. And I asked for, you know, every Easter, Christmas, birthday, whatever it may have been from when I was 10 years old to, you know, high school. I always wanted a dog of my own, and Dad always said, well, you won't be able to handle the responsibility. You're too young. And so finally, he got me a dog when I was like 16, got me a black lab, British lab, and his name was Jake. And that kind of started, you know, he was an unbelievable dog. The whole family loved him. He was a family dog. And, you know, that kind of sparked our obsession with kind of British labs specifically, but, you know, just seeing how great of dogs they were. And so from that really is where the kennel was kind of originated, kind of, you know, breeding and selling British labs. And anyway, Timbo is the son of Jake. So Jake was my first dog. Timbo's been my second dog, and both of them were phenomenal dogs. But yeah, I think, you know, everybody loves to duck hunt, but you know, anybody that has a dog will tell you that, you know, it's just not as much fun without a dog. It just adds that whole dynamic. And, you know, I do a lot of times, and I'm sure a lot of people do this, but I duck hunt, you know, 4 or 5 times a year. I'll just go out, just me and Timbo. We'll go way off into the back of the swamp and with an Argo or a boat or something. And we'll just go try to scratch out a limited ducks, just me and him. And, you know, I love hunting with friends, when turkey hunting and duck hunting specifically, but you know, there's a really cool thing about just hunting with you and a dog, just, you know, by yourselves out in the woods. Nobody's talking. It's just completely quiet. And so anyway, a few times a year, I love just, you know, Timbo and I just striking out through the woods and seeing if we can't bring back a few ducks.
What would you consider to be, like, you know, your best duck hunting moment? Or, you know, kind of like Neil explained, like that's something that he really looks forward to, but Daniel, for you, like, what makes duck hunting so special to you?
My answer is pretty similar to Neil, now that, you know, Neil just had his first son, Toxie Jr., and I just got engaged a week ago, but I don't have kids yet, so our kids is, and you know, baby Toxie is not a year old yet, so our dogs are our, you know, every single person that we know and everybody that takes their kids hunting, they all, it's like your life has changed and you've got a whole different, you know, motivation to get out there and make it good and share it with your kids and all that kind of stuff. But for now, yeah, with Neil, and I got to mention, just be remiss forgetting it, but with the kennels, Bill Gibson, who's our Mossy Oak's director of gun dog operations, which I think we're probably the only outdoor brand that has that job title. but the kennels are actually in my backyard, and Neil, before he got married, lived in that house with me. So we both spend a lot of time around all the dogs because we can hear them barking every second of the day, 200 yards from our backyard. So we're back there all the time. And Bill Gibson is my dad's next door neighbor, and so for years he bred dogs in the backyard, and him and Dad would go train dogs in the backyard in their fishing pond back there. So that came about really naturally from them. But yeah, back to me personally hunting. You know, we're really, really lucky that we live in West Point, which if you haven't been here, it's a very small town right outside of Starkville, where Mississippi State is, and all of our family's hunt land that we've grown up with is right here on the edge of town. So you know, we can go duck hunting, stay at the cabin, wake up, go duck hunt with the dogs, and stroll into the office barely late for work with, you know, barefoot, leave the waders in the bed of the truck and walk right in. So we're really lucky that our duck hunting is really accessible, and you know, due all in thanks to Dad, because obviously East Mississippi over here, we're Northeast, we're not in the natural flyway, so it's really, really important for us, more so than maybe areas that are in the direct flyway, to have a lot of food and imprint on these ducks and give them a reason to come back. And you know, luckily, since we've been in kindergarten and not old enough to know that ducks have to eat anything, Dad's been worried about habitat and having food for ducks to be able to count on, and having a little sanctuary set aside that he can plant every year, and we don't hunt, and we know that the ducks can almost treat it like a little reservoir. And luckily, the whole time we were growing up, Dad was year after year after year just obsessed with ducks and getting them back every single year, and giving them a reason outside of the main flyway to stop through on the edge of West Point, Mississippi, and give us a little something to hunt. So our standards for a good hunt might not be the same as somebody who's hunting some famous duck area in the Delta or in Arkansas or whatever. But luckily, I wouldn't trade it for being lucky enough to hunt 20 minutes from the office and stroll back in our small town here. So being able to get out there a lot with our dogs. One piece of that's kind of funny is that me, Neil, and Dad are almost always the three of us hunting together. And like Neil said, occasionally if the schedules don't work out, we'll split up. Neil and Timo go by themselves or whatever. But for the most part, we're always hunting together. Dad's got his dog Gus, Neil's got his dog Timbo, and I've got my dog Fitz. So a lot of people think, oh, if we hunted 20 mornings in a row, they might think that our dog is the most well-seasoned dog in Northeast Mississippi, but we are on a constant rotation. So some dog is going to get their feelings hurt every single morning because the three of us are going to go, and it's Gus's turn, then it's Timo's turn, then it's Fitz's turn. So they're always subbing in and out for each other. So we've always got one chomping at the bits, ready to go.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, just to answer your question though, but I think my favorite part of waterfowl hunting is, probably a lot of people's is just how cool it is, because you manage a place and you live in a place, and your ducks and your deer, your turkeys and your deer are there year round. They're always on your farm, wherever your place is or wherever you hunt. But it's just such a cool aspect of, the ducks just completely leaving, going thousands of miles away, some all the way as far as Alaska, and just how cool it is to know that duck can just turn back around and fly right back to where he left, and knowing right where he left and imprinting ducks and giving them a reason, like Daniel said, to come back to that area, and, creating, Dad's he's had this obsession for over 20 years now. The first piece of dirt he ever bought in Mississippi, he immediately built a duck impoundment, and then it started from there, and he's probably built, 14 or 15 waterfowl impoundments on our family land here in West Point over the years. It just got this obsession with creating waterfowl habitat, and it's been really cool to see over the years. But as far as favorite stories from hunting, there's a lot of them. My favorite, my first band, I was probably about 12 years old, and Dad and I were one afternoon, saw there was a bunch of mallards coming in this flooded cornfield we had, and we went out and just kind of built a little makeshift blind out of some cane. And sure enough, first greenhead that came in the decoys, I shot. He didn't even bring a gun; he just watching me shoot, and shot greenhead, killed it. Dog went out there and got it and brought it back. And having my first band, just me and Dad hunting together like that, has always been a really special memory. And then one other memory was one of our friends is a Navy SEAL. He's been a Navy SEAL for over 20 years, about as decorated as you can be. But about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, he he had a kid, about 10 years old, and he was like, he's just wearing me out. He's killed like a wood duck, but he's just obsessed with wanting to kill a mallard. He's never killed one. It's like a dream of his to kill a mallard. And and that year, it was a great duck hunting, and we were shooting a lot of mallards. And so I was like, look, that's no problem. We'll go out, come over here this weekend, and we'll get it done. And so we were setting up the decoys. The first light, I told his son, I said, come out here. We're standing kind of out there outside the blind, closer to the decoys, right at first light, and watching ducks come in before shooting hours, and he's just head spinning. And anyway, right after shooting light, the first greenhead that came to decoys, we're standing out there, and he shot it. And my dog Jake went out there and picked it up and brought it back, and sure enough, it had a band on it. So that was his first mallard ever, was a banded greenhead. So I always like to tell that story. That was a pretty cool deal to do that, and then get back to our friend who's spent so many years in the service, and helping him out get his kid his first mallard.
Yeah, that's perfect. I don't think you could have set that up any better. I mean, you couldn't script that thing. Banded duck on the first one. That's so cool. Yeah. And that kind of brings it all full circle right there with your guys' passion for the habitat, really. It's not just the habitat, as we discussed. It's everything to do with the habitat, the ducks, deer, turkeys, all the wildlife. And that kind of leads me to, one of my last questions here. Just when you guys were looking for, a partner in conservation, what made you guys kind of gravitate towards Ducks Unlimited?
Well, I think Ducks Unlimited, more so than a lot of other organizations, it's kind of one of those things that is, there's always been this struggle in the whitetail world for somebody to kind of crack the code of making everybody feel like they have to be part of an organization. It's never really worked out. But what someone does, similar with turkeys, even though National Wild Turkey Federation has done an amazing job of building a community, and they do a lot of great work. But how someone treats their turkey habitat in Michigan is not ever going to affect the turkey population in West Point, Mississippi, and same with deer. What somebody does in Illinois is never going to have an effect on what we're doing down here, barring some crazy chain of events that happens. But with waterfowl, you can't do it on your own, and without the help of someone like Ducks Unlimited taking care of all these really daunting problems that there's no way little hunting communities can solve on their own. There's just no possible way that we would all survive, or that we would know that somebody is looking after the critters and waterfowl all over North America are in good hands, no matter what point of the migration they're on, or if it's habitat down here for people that only see them when they're hunting, or if it's habitat from stopover areas or parts of the country that people never travel. And it's more essential with waterfowl, I feel like, than just about anything else, to make sure that people like you guys are taking care of everything for us, so that the ducks are going to show back up next year, and we know that when the duck season closes, waiting on next November to come, that y'all are working with all the best biologists in the country, and working with all the best local landowners and farmers and whoever else, taking care of all these projects that are completely essential to making sure that the resource is around for another 100 years.
Awesome, man. No, that's perfect. And I know here at Ducks Unlimited, we appreciate Mossy Oak's partnership. It just seems to be such a natural fit, and you guys are a great partner. Even with things like this, coming on the podcast, kind of sharing your story. It's really cool for our audience to hear your guys' personal stories. And one last question before I get you out of here. Who's a better shot between you two? Oh, it got quiet real quick.
I'll answer it so Neill doesn't sound like he's bragging, but Neill's better at a lot of things than me. I feel like I have to try a little harder. My dad and my granddad both have, I think they're woodsmen on the level that Daniel Boone or some old frontiersman would appreciate. They've got this level of woodsmanship that's unbelievable, and you really see it when you're turkey hunting more than anything. But Neill has a lot of that in him, and I've got a lot of the get lost in the woods, walking to the tree in me. And I guess that translates to Neill being a better shot too, because I've got no problem admitting that one.
There's been plenty of days where Daniel's outshot me. So yeah, it just depends on the day, I think.
That's awesome. That's cool. That was a good way to answer it. You guys are both so nice to each other. It's awesome. Being kind, not cribbing the other.
Once the phone call ends, I'm sure we'll get into an argument about who's the better shot.
Perfect. That's all I was trying to do, is just start an argument between you guys. Man, guys, this has been great. I really enjoyed hearing your guys' story, hearing the Mossy Oak story. I appreciate you coming on, and you know what, we're gonna have to try and get you guys back on again, especially once season kicks on. You know, maybe or the season kicks in. What we can do is bring you on to kind of do a little bit of maybe a migration type update from your area down there, to kind of see what you guys are seeing. We still have like a month or so till season kicks in there. So
yeah, we're already starting to see some. It's not even November yet. We're already starting to see big ducks flying around and using some of the water that we have. Most of our stuff is dry, but some of the sloughs and stuff, there's already ducks around. So
hey, that's exciting. That's a way to get excited about it.
Yeah, just it's hard to watch them for a whole month knowing you can't go do anything about it. But yeah, I mean, it is fun watching them though. And then that dad says all the time, you know, he spends all his energy creating this waterfowl habitat, and for the, you know, he loves to shoot ducks more than just as much as the next person, but more than that, he loves watching ducks. You know, he'll just go out and just watch ducks for hours and just watch them flying in and big groups coming into the ponds, and just, you know, he loves being able to just sit and watch them. And so that's one of his favorite things. And so I've always thought that's pretty cool.
He did definitely, his obsession comes out if you ever get, there's some mornings where he's paranoid that we don't have any ducks anywhere, and you know, we go to the one spot where he knows we have ducks, and legal shooting time gets here and he won't let anybody in the blind shoot, and he just wants to watch the ducks fly because he's so paranoid that the ducks are going to leave, or that we're going to, you know, for short term 10-15 minutes right at shooting light, killing a bunch of ducks is gonna harm the rest of the season or whatever. So there are plenty of mornings where he just gets out there and watches ducks, and me and Neill are kind of elbowing him in the ribs, and he I mean, he's like a kid in a candy store. If he's got ducks and he's watching them fly, you just see the little twinkle in his eye. You know, there's like I think a natural wonder that everybody's born with, that you have when you're a kid, when you're walking around in the woods and everything's new, and the world kind of you know, conditions people to leave that behind as they grow up. But Dad never lost that, and whether it's turkeys, deer, ducks, or even walking around with my grandmother, seeing all the wildflowers that are growing on our property. I mean, every aspect of the land and the critters he's just obsessed with.
That's awesome. No, that's perfect. Hey guys, I appreciate you coming on. Well, like I said, we're going to have to do it again here soon. And yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, we'd love to come back, and we appreciate you having us, and look forward to talking ducks in the future.
I'd like to thank my guests, Daniel and Neill Haas from Mossy Oak, for joining me today and talking about the history of Mossy Oak and a little bit about their own duck hunting, which was awesome. I'd like to thank our producer, Chris Isaac, for putting the show together and getting it out to you. And I'd like to thank you, the listener, for joining us on the DU podcast and supporting wetlands conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And visit www.ducks.org/DU podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the ducks.